In a Seattle corporate conference room, an overlooked contract lawyer was about to face termination 3 days before Christmas. What started as a routine meeting took a shocking turn when executives delivered her pink slip. Shalom Anderson wasn't your typical legal employee. For 5 years, she had crafted airtight contracts known for her methodical precision and strategic thinking. When she encountered corporate betrayal disguised as budget cuts, she had no idea they were triggering a legal weapon. Anderson's embedded poison pill clause would bankrupt the very executives who fired her. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Christmas tree in Meridian Tech Solutions lobby stood 7 feet tall, adorned with silver and gold ornaments that caught the late afternoon light streaming through Seattle's perpetually gray December sky. Its LED lights blinked in cheerful patterns while Bing Crosby's voice drifted from hidden speakers, promising dreams of white Christmas mornings. But the festive atmosphere felt forced, like makeup applied over bruises. Shalom Anderson pushed her reading glasses higher on her nose and returned her attention to the executive compensation agreement spread across her cramped desk. The numbers didn't add up. They never did when Marcus Webb's signature appeared at the bottom, but tonight the discrepancies seemed particularly glaring. Stock option grants dated retroactively, performance bonuses calculated using metrics that didn't exist in the company's official documentation, severance multipliers that defied industry standards. Her fingers traced the contract clauses with the precision of a surgeon examining X-rays. 23 years of legal training had taught her to see patterns where others saw only corporate boilerplate. And this pattern suggested something far more troubling than simple accounting errors. "Still here, Shalom?" Lisa Park's voice carried across the cube farm, where most desks sat empty despite the official end of business still being an hour away. The 26-year-old associate clutched a stack of files against her chest like armor, her usual confidence replaced by something that looked dangerously close to fear. "Just finishing up some reviews," Shalom replied, closing the folder and giving Lisa her full attention. The younger woman had been her unofficial protégé for 2 years, ever since joining Meridian straight from law school with idealistic notions about corporate integrity and fair compensation. Shalom recognized that optimism. She'd worn it once, before experience taught her the difference between what companies claimed to value and what they actually rewarded. Lisa glanced toward the executive floor where lights still blazed behind glass offices. "Have you heard anything about the holiday bonuses? The support staff are asking questions, and I don't know what to tell them." The question carried weight beyond its simple words. In previous years, Meridian's holiday bonuses had been announced by mid-December, allowing employees to plan their celebrations accordingly. This year, silence stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap. "Nothing official," Shalom said carefully, watching Lisa's shoulders tense. "But budget meetings have been running longer than usual." 3 floors above them, Marcus Webb leaned back in his leather chair and studied the woman across from his mahogany desk. Diana Rodriguez had been Meridian's CFO for 4 years, climbing from senior accountant through careful competence and an unwillingness to ask uncomfortable questions. Tonight, her usual composure showed hairline cracks. "The quarterly projections are concerning," she said, her accent carrying the slight formality that emerged when she felt defensive. "If we maintain current expenditure levels through Q1, we'll need to consider significant restructuring." Marcus's smile never reached his eyes. He'd perfected that expression during his rise through Meridian's ranks, charming enough to disarm, confident enough to intimidate. Restructuring. Such a clinical word. What you mean is firing people right before Christmas. "I mean protecting the company's long-term viability." Diana's voice carried conviction, but her fingers worried the edge of a financial report. "We have obligations to our shareholders, our remaining employees." "Our remaining employees." Marcus tasted the phrase like expensive wine. "Tell me, Diana, What would you consider expendable? The support staff who've been here since the company started? The junior associates who work 60-hour weeks for 30-hour pay? Or perhaps the senior staff who've accumulated inconvenient amounts of institutional knowledge? The question hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. Diana understood the subtext. She'd been navigating Marcus's coded language for months now, ever since his divorce settlement had been bleeding his personal finances, and his judgment had grown increasingly erratic. Personnel decisions should be based on performance metrics and departmental needs, she said, falling back on HR handbook language like a fortress wall. Of course, Marcus's tone suggested anything but agreement. Performance metrics. I trust you'll have recommendations for me by Monday morning. 2 floors below, Jake Thompson sat in the server room's perpetual mechanical hum, his monitor casting blue light across his angular features. The timestamp on his current query read 7:23 p.m., well past normal business hours, but the database activity he was tracking suggested someone else shared his dedication to after-hours work. His fingers moved across the keyboard with the efficiency of a concert pianist, each command precisely calculated. Former military cybersecurity specialists didn't lose their methodical approach to investigation simply because they traded combat boots for corporate
casual. And what he was seeing in the access logs suggested someone had been very busy with financial data during times when most employees were home with their families. Query executed. Results populated. Jake's jaw tightened as he recognized the pattern. Systematic access to employee salary databases, pension fund allocations, and executive compensation records, all during weekend hours, all traced to administrative credentials that should have been dormant. He opened a new file and began documenting, understanding that patterns like this rarely emerged without purpose. In Afghanistan, such behavior would have triggered immediate investigation protocols. In corporate America, it required more careful handling, but the underlying principle remained the same. When someone worked this hard to hide their activities, those activities were worth hiding. Shalom's phone buzzed against her desk, interrupting her review of another problematic contract. Emma's name appeared on the screen along with a photo from last summer, her 16-year-old daughter laughing at Pike Place Market, holding a bouquet of flowers they couldn't quite afford. "Hey, sweetheart," Shalom answered, conscious of Lisa still hovering nearby. "Mom, are you still at work?" Emma's voice carried gentle reproach mixed with understanding. She'd grown up watching her mother navigate the delicate balance between professional obligations and single parenthood, learning to read the subtle signs that indicated particularly stressful days. "Just wrapping up. What's going on?" "I was thinking about Christmas dinner. Should we stick with the turkey breast, or would you prefer something simpler this year?" The question carried careful consideration for their budget, though Emma phrased it as preference rather than necessity. Shalom felt the familiar tightness in her chest, pride in her daughter's maturity warring with guilt that such maturity had been necessary. "The turkey sounds perfect. Are you working on your college applications?" "Already submitted 3 more today. Mrs. Patterson says my essay about legal ethics is really strong." Emma's excitement bubbled through the phone. "I've been thinking about what you said about using the law to protect people who can't protect themselves." "The law is a tool," Shalom said, aware that Lisa was listening, but unable to suppress her maternal pride. Like any tool, its value depends on who wields it and how they choose to use it. After ending the call, she found Lisa still standing beside her desk, the younger woman's expression thoughtful. "She sounds amazing," Lisa said. "You must be proud." Every day, Shalom gathered her papers, preparing to finally head home. "Lisa, whatever happens with the holiday bonuses or anything else, remember that your value isn't determined by how a company chooses to treat you. Your skills, your integrity, your potential, those belong to you." Lisa nodded, but her eyes remained troubled. "Shalom, can I ask you something? If you knew a company was making decisions that would hurt good people, people who didn't deserve it, what would you do?" The question struck closer to home than Lisa could have known. Shalom looked at the young woman who reminded her so much of her younger self, brilliant, ethical, still believing that doing the right thing would be rewarded rather than punished. "I'd document everything," she said finally. "I'd make sure someone with authority knew the truth. And I'd prepare for the possibility that doing the right thing might come with a price. As Lisa walked away, Shalom's computer chimed with an incoming email. The sender line showed Marcus Webb's name, and the subject read, "Monday morning meeting, urgent." She opened it with the same careful attention she'd given to the contracts, reading each word twice. The message was brief, almost perfunctory. Her presence was requested at a 9 a.m. meeting in Conference Room A to discuss organizational adjustments and your role moving forward. The phrasing triggered memories of her father's final months, when his small manufacturing business had been systematically dismantled by a larger competitor using legal technicalities and predatory contract terms. She'd been fresh out of law school then, too inexperienced to recognize the warning signs until it was too late. But she wasn't that naive young attorney anymore, and unlike her father, she'd spent years preparing for corporate warfare disguised as business decisions. Shalom saved the email and shut down her computer, her expression calm despite the adrenaline beginning to course through her veins. Around her, the office settled into its nighttime quiet, the cheerful Christmas music still playing for an audience of empty desks and abandoned coffee cups. She gathered her coat and purse, moving with the deliberate pace of someone who understood that Monday morning would bring either vindication or catastrophe. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The elevator doors closed with a soft whisper, and Shalom descended into the Seattle evening, already mentally reviewing the contract clauses that might soon determine the fate of everyone she'd left behind in those cheerfully decorated offices above.
Marcus's hand trembled almost imperceptibly as he reached for his coffee cup, the porcelain clicking against his wedding ring, the one he'd forgotten to remove even 6 months after the divorce papers were signed. Monday morning had arrived gray and unforgiving, Seattle's winter sky pressing against Conference Room A's floor-to-ceiling windows like a wet blanket. Shalom entered at precisely 9 a.m., her leather portfolio clutched with the same calm precision she'd carried into every meeting for 5 years. She noted the occupants immediately: Marcus at the head of the mahogany table, Diana Rodriguez positioned strategically to his right, and Patricia Hayes from HR, flanking his left like a corporate tribunal. "Please sit." Marcus's voice carried artificial warmth, the tone salesmen used when delivering bad news to longtime clients. The chair they'd selected for her faced the windows, ensuring the harsh morning light would catch every micro-expression while keeping their faces in shadow. Shalom recognized the psychology. She'd seen similar arrangements in depositions where opposing counsel sought every possible advantage. "Shalom, we appreciate your dedication to Meridian," Patricia began, consulting notes she'd clearly rehearsed. "However, current market conditions require difficult organizational adjustments." The words washed over Shalom like rehearsed theater. She'd heard this performance before, when her father's suppliers had systematically withdrawn their contracts using identical corporate speak: budget constraints, market pressures, regrettable but necessary decisions. "Your position is being eliminated effective immediately," Marcus added, his gaze fixed somewhere above her left shoulder. "We've prepared a comprehensive severance package that reflects your years of service." Shalom's expression remained neutral, though her mind cataloged every detail with legal precision. The timing, December 23rd, ensuring maximum personal disruption. The witnesses, carefully selected to minimize liability. The language, crafted to suggest inevitable business forces rather than deliberate targeting. "I assume you have documentation supporting this decision?" she asked, her voice carrying the measured authority that had once made opposing counsel uncomfortable in courtroom encounters. Diana shifted in her seat, the financial reports before her suddenly requiring intense scrutiny. "Budget projections indicate—" "Specific documentation," Shalom interrupted gently. "Performance reviews, departmental restructuring plans, the decision matrix used to select my position for elimination." Marcus's smile tightened.
Shalom, I understand this is difficult, but the decision is final. Patricia will walk you through the severance details. Through the conference room's glass walls, Shalom could see Jake Thompson at his workstation, his attention seemingly focused on his monitor. But she caught the subtle movement of his head. He was watching, documenting, understanding that something significant was unfolding in this sterile corporate theater. "I'll need copies of my complete personnel file," Shalom said, accepting the severance folder without opening it, "including my original employment contract." "Of course," Patricia replied quickly, "standard procedure." 20 minutes later, Shalom walked past her former desk while security waited with practiced patience. Her personal items, a photo of Emma, her father's fountain pen, and a small cactus that had survived 5 years of fluorescent lighting, fit easily into a single cardboard box. As the elevator descended, Shalom finally allowed herself a small smile, remembering the contract clauses she'd carefully crafted years earlier, buried deep in legal language that had seemed routine to whoever had approved them. Her corporate executioners had no idea they'd just activated their own destruction. Her corporate executioners had no idea they'd just activated their own destruction. The thought echoed in Shalom's mind as she spread her employment contract across her kitchen table Christmas Eve morning, each page weighted down with coffee mugs and her father's old paperweights. Emma moved quietly through their modest apartment, hanging silver garland with the careful precision she'd inherited from her mother. Occasionally, she glanced toward the kitchen, sensing the focused intensity that meant her mother was working on something important. "Mom, do you want to start the coffee cake?" Emma asked, pausing in the doorway. "That would be wonderful, sweetheart." Shalom looked up from section 12.7, subsection C, language that had seemed like standard boilerplate when she drafted it 3 years ago. Now it read like a declaration of war. The poison pill provisions had been her insurance policy, crafted during late nights when memories of her father's destroyed business burned like acid in her chest. She'd buried them deep within routine termination clauses, interconnected triggers that would only activate under specific circumstances of wrongful discharge. Her finger traced the relevant text. "In the event of termination without cause during the final quarter of any fiscal year, employees shall be entitled to accelerated vesting of all outstanding equity positions, including not limited to—" The language spiraled from there. Stock options, intellectual property assignments, non-compete clause nullifications. Each provision had been carefully calibrated, designed to create cascading financial obligations that would drain company resources like a slow hemorrhage. Her phone buzzed. Lisa Park's name appeared on the screen along with a text. "They fired 3 more people this morning. Christmas Eve. I don't understand how they can do this."
Shalom's jaw tightened as she typed back. "Document everything. Names, dates, stated reasons. Trust me." She returned to the contract, calculating potential financial impact. The stock option accelerations alone would cost Meridian nearly $2 million. Add the intellectual property transfers, she'd personally negotiated the licensing agreements for their 3 most profitable software platforms, and the number climbed toward catastrophic. "Are we going to be okay?" Emma asked quietly, setting down her own coffee to study her mother's face. Shalom reached across the table, taking her daughter's hand. The gesture was gentle, but Emma felt the steel beneath her mother's calm exterior. The same quiet strength that had carried them through her father's absence, through lean months when legal work was scarce, through every challenge that had shaped their small family. "We're going to be more than okay," Shalom said, her voice carrying absolute conviction. "Sometimes people who think they hold all the power forget that knowledge is the ultimate weapon." She turned back to the contract with predatory focus, already composing the legal response that would transform Christmas Day into the beginning of Marcus Webb's corporate nightmare. The legal counterattack that would transform Christmas Day into Marcus Webb's corporate nightmare began with a simple email timestamp: December 26th, 8:47 a.m. Sarah Mitchell, Shalom's attorney, had spent her holiday morning reviewing 43 pages of meticulously documented contract provisions with the focused intensity of a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. Now she hit send on the most devastating legal filing she'd crafted in 20 years of employment law. At Meridian Tech Solutions, the building stood nearly empty, its holiday skeleton crew unaware that their company's future had just been fundamentally altered by electronic documents winging through Seattle's fiber optic infrastructure. Marcus Webb lounged in his Bellevue penthouse, nursing his third mimosa while reviewing stock portfolios on his tablet. The divorce settlement had been brutal, but with Shalom Anderson eliminated and Diana Rodriguez properly managed, he could begin the careful embezzlement that would restore his personal finances. The morning felt full of possibility. His phone buzzed. Patricia Hayes from HR, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Marcus, we have a situation. Shalom Anderson's attorney just filed a comprehensive challenge to her termination. It's extensive." "How extensive?" Marcus set down his drink, the first cold fingers of dread beginning to crawl up his spine. 43 pages. Stock option accelerations, intellectual property transfers, non-compete nullifications. Our legal department is saying potential liability could exceed how much, Patricia? $7.2 million. And that's just the immediate obligations. The number hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd authorized Shalom's termination to eliminate a potential witness to his financial irregularities, never suspecting she'd embedded contractual landmines throughout her employment agreement. 2 floors below Marcus's penthouse office, Jake Thompson worked in the blessed quiet of post-holiday solitude, his investigation finally bearing fruit. The database anomalies he'd been tracking formed a clear pattern now. Systematic fund transfers, falsified expense reports, vendor payments to companies that existed only on paper. His phone rang. Diana Rodriguez, her voice strained. "Jake, I need to ask you something, confidentially. Have you noticed any unusual activity in our financial databases? Late-night access, queries that don't match normal business patterns?" Jake paused, understanding that Diana's question represented a crucial moment. Corporate loyalty warred with professional integrity, but his military training had taught him that honor always trumped convenience. "Yes," he said simply. "I've been documenting everything." "Can you send me what you have? All of it?" Across town, Shalom's phone rang with the call she'd been expecting. Bob Castellano, board chairman, his voice carrying the careful neutrality of a man suddenly facing catastrophic corporate liability. "Miss Anderson, I believe we need to discuss your recent legal filing. Perhaps we can find a mutually beneficial resolution." "Mr. Castellano," Shalom replied, her voice calm as winter steel. "The time for negotiation ended when your company's CEO decided to terminate my employment on December 23rd. Now we proceed according to the contract terms your company legally agreed to honor." The first domino had fallen. The corporate earthquake was just beginning. The first domino had fallen, and by New Year's Eve, Meridian Tech Solutions faced the kind of perfect storm that business schools would study for decades to come. Shalom Anderson stood at her apartment window watching Seattle Space Needle prepare for its midnight fireworks display. The financial markets wouldn't open for another day, but she'd already received calls from 3 employment attorneys representing other terminated employees, 2 investigative journalists, and 1 very nervous insurance adjuster trying to calculate Meridian's potential liability exposure. Her phone buzzed with a text from her attorney. "Stock down 31% in after-hours trading. Board meeting called for January 2nd. They're panicking." Emma appeared beside her, carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate topped with marshmallows, their traditional New Year's Eve celebration since she was 8 years old.
"Mom, you're smiling," Emma observed, settling onto the couch. "Actually smiling, not that polite work smile you use when people are being idiots." "I'm proud of you for noticing the difference," Shalom replied, accepting the cocoa. "And yes, I suppose I am. Sometimes patience and preparation create opportunities you never expected." Across the city, Marcus Webb paced his penthouse office like a caged predator, his expensive suit wrinkled from 3 days of crisis management. The whiskey tumbler in his hand was his fourth of the evening, but alcohol wasn't dulling the mathematical precision of his approaching catastrophe. Diana Rodriguez sat across from his desk, her own drink untouched, as she delivered the financial projections that would haunt Marcus's remaining nights as CEO. The poison pill provisions are cascading faster than our legal team anticipated, she said, her voice carrying exhaustion mixed with something that might have been relief. Stock option accelerations triggered additional clauses in our vendor contracts. The software licensing transfers alone will cost us how much? Marcus's voice was raw from hours of shouting at attorneys who couldn't undo contracts he'd been too arrogant to properly review. Conservatively, $14.7 million in the first quarter. That's assuming no additional employees file similar claims. Marcus slumped into his chair, understanding finally that Shalom Anderson had crafted something far more sophisticated than a simple severance agreement. She'd created a corporate doomsday device, hidden in plain sight, waiting for exactly the kind of wrongful termination he'd been too stupid to avoid. His phone rang. Bob Castellano, the board chairman whose calls Marcus had been avoiding for 3 days. "Bob," Marcus answered, forcing confidence into his voice. "Happy New Year." "Cut the pleasantries. I've got insurance companies threatening to pull coverage, shareholders demanding explanations, and federal regulators asking questions about our financial reporting. What the hell is going on?" 2 floors below, Jake Thompson worked through his own New Year's Eve in the server room's fluorescent embrace. The financial database anomalies he'd been tracking had evolved from suspicious patterns into a clear narrative of systematic theft. His military training had taught him to document everything, and 3 months of investigation now filled encrypted drives with evidence that would reshape careers and possibly destroy lives. His secure phone rang, the number he'd given to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit 2 days earlier. "Agent Morrison," the voice said without preamble, "we need to meet. Tomorrow, 0900 hours. Federal Building, 15th floor." Jake had expected this call, but it still sent adrenaline coursing through his system. Crossing from corporate employee to federal witness represented a line that once crossed would define the rest of his career. "Yes, ma'am," he replied. "I'll bring everything." At her apartment, Lisa Park tried to focus on the New Year's Eve party her friends had organized, but her mind kept returning to the email she'd received that afternoon. 3 more employment attorneys had contacted her, along with a class action specialist who used words like systematic discrimination and corporate malfeasance. She thought about Shalom's advice: document everything. Make sure someone with authority knows the truth. Prepare for the possibility that doing the right thing might come with a price. The price was becoming clear. Her career at Meridian was over whether the company survived or not. But for the first time since her termination, Lisa felt something approaching hope. As midnight approached and Seattle's skyline erupted in celebration, 4 people in different parts of the city understood that they were about to witness either justice or destruction, and possibly both simultaneously. The walls were closing in on Marcus Webb, but the question remained whether they would crush only him or bring down everything he'd built around himself. The emergency board meeting convened at 8 o'clock sharp on a frigid January morning. The glass-walled conference room 30 floors above Seattle resembled a fishbowl of corporate anxiety. Bob Castellano sat at the head of the mahogany table, his weathered face grave as he surveyed the assembled directors. The comfortable familiarity of decades-old business relationships had evaporated overnight, replaced by the cold arithmetic of fiduciary responsibility. Marcus Webb occupied his usual seat, but his trademark confidence had abandoned him. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his expensive suit couldn't hide the slight tremor in his hands as he shuffled through legal documents.
Across from him, Diana Rodriguez maintained perfect posture, a thick folder of financial records positioned precisely before her like ammunition. "Before we begin formal proceedings," Castellano announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to difficult decisions, "I want everyone to understand that this meeting is being recorded and that legal counsel is present." He nodded toward the two attorneys flanking the room's periphery. "We're here because our company faces potential criminal liability alongside the civil matters already filed."
Jake Thompson entered through the side door, his laptop bag slung across his shoulder and a portable hard drive clutched in his palm. The young IT specialist had requested whistleblower protection 3 days earlier, and his presence at the board meeting represented a seismic shift in corporate power dynamics. He'd spent sleepless nights preparing his presentation, knowing that his technical evidence would either validate Shalom's accusations or destroy his own career. "Jake will present his findings first," Castellano continued. "Then we'll hear from Diana regarding the financial irregularities she's discovered." Marcus straightened in his chair, his lawyer whispering urgent instructions in his ear. "I object to the circus atmosphere," he said, his voice strained but defiant. "Jake Thompson is a disgruntled employee with questionable access to confidential systems. His so-called evidence was obtained through unauthorized means." Jake connected his laptop to the room's projection system, his military training keeping his voice steady despite the hostile stares from several board members. "Every query I documented was logged through authorized system access," he replied. "I'm the IT security specialist. Monitoring unusual database activity is literally my job." The first slide appeared on the conference room's massive display screen, showing a timeline of database queries spanning 6 months. Each entry was timestamped, tagged with user credentials, and linked to specific financial records. The pattern was unmistakable: systematic extraction of salary information, stock option details, and executive compensation data, all occurring during off hours when the office was empty. These queries were conducted using Marcus Webb's administrative credentials, Jake explained, highlighting specific entries in red. The pattern shows particular focus on employees who were subsequently terminated, including Shalom Anderson. The data was exported to external drives on multiple occasions. Diana opened her folder and withdrew a stack of printed bank statements, her voice professionally neutral but her hands trembling slightly. "These statements show irregular fund transfers from our executive discretionary account to Marcus's personal investment portfolio. The transfers total $2.7 million over 18 months. The silence in the room was absolute, except for the hum of ventilation systems and the distant sound of Seattle traffic below. Marcus's face had gone pale, beads of perspiration visible on his forehead despite the conference room's cool temperature. That money was authorized executive compensation, board-approved performance bonuses, and stock option exercises." "No," Diana replied firmly, her immigrant parents' sacrifices giving her strength to speak truth to power. "I've reviewed every board resolution and compensation committee meeting for the past 2 years. None of these transfers were authorized. And Marcus," she turned to face him directly, "I have copies of your personal trading accounts showing how this money was used to cover margin calls and divorce settlement payments." Board member Patricia Henley leaned forward, her voice sharp with betrayal. "Are you telling us that Marcus has been embezzling company funds to pay his ex-wife?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you. And when Shalom Anderson's routine contract reviews got close to discovering the discrepancies, he decided to eliminate the threat by terminating her employment." Marcus finally exploded, his carefully maintained facade shattering completely. "This is a coordinated attack by disgruntled employees and ambitious subordinates. Diana wants my job, Jake's angry about being passed over for promotion, and that woman," he practically spat Shalom's name, "has been planning this vendetta for years." Castellano's voice cut through Marcus's outburst like winter wind. "Enough." He turned to the legal counsel. "What are our obligations here?" "We must vote on Marcus's immediate termination. We also need to approve criminal referrals to both federal and state prosecutors. The board has 30 days to file required SEC disclosures regarding executive misconduct." The vote was swift and unanimous. Marcus Webb was terminated effective immediately, his access to systems revoked, and his personal effects would be boxed and delivered. As security escorted him from the building, his parting words carried the bitter resentment of someone who'd never understood the difference between leadership and exploitation. Diana accepted the interim CEO role with characteristic competence, immediately authorizing complete financial transparency with Shalom's legal team. The poison pill provisions had served their purpose, exposing corruption and removing its source, but the company's survival now depended on rebuilding trust through authentic accountability. 30 blocks away, Shalom read the news alerts on her phone while Emma studied at the kitchen table. Justice, she reflected, sometimes moved with surprising speed once the truth found its voice. 2 weeks after Marcus's removal, Shalom sat in her home office staring at financial projections that made her stomach churn. Her poison pill provisions had worked exactly as designed. Too well, perhaps. The cascading obligations triggered by her wrongful termination claim were bleeding Meridian dry at a rate of nearly $200,000 per day. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd crafted the clauses to punish corporate malfeasance, but their success threatened to destroy the livelihoods of hundreds of innocent employees who had nothing to do with Marcus's crimes.
Emma knocked softly and entered without waiting for permission, carrying 2 cups of coffee. At 16, she'd developed an uncanny ability to sense her mother's internal struggles. "Lisa called," Emma said, settling into the chair across from the desk. "She said the employees are scared, really scared." Shalom accepted the coffee gratefully, inhaling the familiar aroma that couldn't quite mask her growing unease. "I know, sweetheart, it's complicated." "Is it, though?" Emma's direct gaze reminded Shalom uncomfortably of herself at that age. "You got justice, Marcus is gone, everyone knows he's a thief, and the FBI is building a case. But now, the people who trusted you, Lisa, Jake, all those other employees, they're going to lose their jobs because of what you did." The words stung because they carried truth. Shalom had spent her career fighting for the underdog, protecting employees from corporate abuse. Now, her own strategic brilliance threatened to become the instrument of their destruction. "Your grandfather always said that real justice protects the innocent while punishing the guilty," Emma continued. "But this feels like carpet bombing when you needed a precision strike." Shalom's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Diana Rodriguez. She'd been expecting this conversation for days, dreading it but knowing it was inevitable. "Shalom, we need to talk." Diana's voice carried exhaustion and determination in equal measure. "I have a proposal that might save the company and preserve most jobs, but it would require you to accept significantly less than your contract entitles you to." Through her window, Shalom could see the Seattle skyline where Meridian's building stood, housing hundreds of families whose futures hung in the balance. Her father had built his small business to provide for others, not to enrich himself. Perhaps true victory lay not in maximizing her personal gain, but in finding a path that honored his memory while protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. "Send me the details," she said quietly. "Let's see if justice and mercy can coexist." Emma smiled and squeezed her other's hand. Sometimes the hardest battles were fought not against enemies, but against the temptation to let righteous anger overwhelm compassionate wisdom. Outside, the January rain began to fall, washing Seattle's streets clean. The negotiations took place in a neutral conference room downtown, far from Meridian's emotionally charged offices. Late January snow dusted Seattle's streets as representatives from 5 different interest groups gathered around an oval table that had witnessed countless corporate settlements. Shalom sat flanked by her attorneys, facing Diana Rodriguez and Meridian's interim board, while federal prosecutors occupied chairs along the windows and employee representatives clustered near the door. The morning began with Diana's carefully prepared presentation. Financial charts projected onto the wall showed 2 stark scenarios: continued enforcement of Shalom's poison pill provisions leading to bankruptcy by March, or a negotiated settlement that would preserve roughly 80% of current jobs, while ensuring full restitution to Marcus's victims. "The mathematics are unforgiving," Diana explained, her voice steady despite the weight of everyone's futures resting on her words. "You can honor the letter of Shalom's contract and watch 700 families lose their livelihoods, or we can find a solution that serves justice while protecting the innocent."
Shalom studied the faces around the table, recognizing the profound responsibility that her legal brilliance had created. Her poison pill had been designed as a corporate nuclear option, and like all nuclear weapons, its power was indiscriminate once unleashed. "What specifically are you proposing?" she asked. Diana opened a thick folder and began outlining the compromise framework. Shalom would receive 50% of her contractual settlement, still a substantial sum that would secure Emma's college education and their financial future. The remaining funds would be redirected to employee severance packages, ensuring 6 months of salary continuation for anyone terminated during the restructuring. Most importantly, the agreement included ironclad guarantees. No more than 15% of the workforce would be eliminated, and all cuts would come from management layers rather than individual contributors. "There's more," Diana continued. "We're offering you the position of Chief Ethics Officer, reporting directly to the board rather than executive management. Your job would be implementing oversight systems to prevent future corruption." The federal prosecutor cleared her throat. "Mr. Webb has indicated willingness to accept a plea agreement contingent on full financial disclosure and victim restitution. Your cooperation in documenting the scoop of his activities would be crucial for ensuring complete recovery of stolen funds." Shalom felt Emma's voice echoing in her memory. Real justice protects the innocent while punishing the guilty. The room waited in silence as she weighed personal vindication against collective welfare. Jake Thompson, who had been quietly reviewing technical specifications on his laptop, suddenly looked up. "There's something else to consider," he said. "If we can stabilize the company and demonstrate effective governance reform, the reputation recovery could actually increase Meridian's value long term. We become a case study in corporate accountability rather than just another scandal." Lisa Park, representing the employee group, leaned forward eagerly. "The younger staff especially want to stay and be part of rebuilding something better. We've seen what happens when companies prioritize ethics. They attract better clients, better talent, better opportunities."
Bob Castellano, who had remained silent through most of the morning, finally spoke. "I've been in business for 40 years, and I've learned that the companies that survive crises are the ones that choose stakeholder value over shareholder extraction." He turned to Shalom. "Your contract provisions were brilliant, but your willingness to modify them for the greater good, that's leadership." As lunch break approached, Shalom stepped outside for fresh air, Emma's earlier words still resonating. Her phone buzzed with a text from her daughter. "Dad always said the measure of justice isn't how completely you defeat your enemies, but how well you protect those who can't protect themselves. I'm proud of whatever you decide, but I think you already know what he would want." The snow continued falling, each flake unique but contributing to a larger pattern of renewal. When negotiations resumed, Shalom would have her answer ready. True victory, she had learned, sometimes required the wisdom to accept less than everything in order to achieve more than anyone expected. February's pale sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Shalom's new office, a corner space on Meridian's 28th floor that she'd never imagined occupying during her years in the cramped legal department. The nameplate beside her door read, Chief Ethics Officer, a title that carried both authority and responsibility in equal measure. 3 weeks had passed since the settlement agreement was finalized, and Meridian Tech Solutions was beginning to show signs of genuine transformation. The company's stock price had stabilized after an initial plunge, helped by investor confidence in the new government structure and Diana's transparent leadership approach. More importantly, the culture was shifting in ways that couldn't be measured in quarterly reports. The Anonymous Ethics Hotline received 12 reports this week, Jake Thompson announced, reviewing his tablet as he settled into one of Shalom's client chairs. His promotion to Chief Information Security Officer had been unanimous, recognizing both his technical expertise and proven integrity. Nothing major, mostly requests for clarification on new policies, and one complaint about expense account irregularities in marketing. Shalom nodded, making notes on her legal pad.
The hotline had been her first initiative as Chief Ethics Officer, providing employees with a safe channel for reporting concerns without fear of retaliation. The fact that people were using it suggested growing trust in the company's commitment to accountability. "How's the new financial monitoring system performing?" she asked. "Perfectly. Every transaction over $5,000 requires dual approval, and the automated alerts catch anything unusual within hours instead of months." Jake's pride in the technical implementation was evident. Diana's been great about transparency. She actually requested additional oversight on her own expense account. Through her office windows, Shalom could see the Seattle courthouse where Marcus Webb's trial was entering its second week. The local news had covered the proceedings extensively, turning Meridian's corporate scandal into a cautionary tale about executive accountability. The publicity had been uncomfortable, but ultimately beneficial, demonstrating the company's commitment to justice rather than cover-up. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Nailed my Stanford interview! They were really interested in my essay about corporate ethics and social responsibility. Wonder where I got those ideas." Shalom smiled, remembering the evening conversations where she had shared her work challenges with her daughter, never imagining that those discussions would influence Emma's academic interests. The scholarship fund established from her settlement would ensure Emma could pursue her passion for law and social justice without financial constraints. Diana knocked on the open door, carrying a stack of reports and wearing the focused expression that had become her trademark as CEO. The board had made her appointment permanent the week before, recognizing her steady leadership during the crisis and her vision for Meridian's future. "The Q1 financials are looking better than projected," Diana announced, settling into the chair beside Jake. "We're actually ahead of the conservative estimates we gave the board. The efficiency improvements from eliminating redundant management layers are paying off faster than expected." "And employee morale?" Shalom asked, knowing that financial recovery meant nothing without cultural renewal. "Lisa's employee satisfaction surveys show significant improvement," Diana replied. "People feel heard, they trust the leadership team, and they're excited about the company's direction. We've had 3 competitors try to recruit our top developers, and all of them turned down the offers to stay here." Jake looked up from his tablet. "Speaking of Lisa, her bar exam results came back yesterday. She passed on the first try and wants to know if we'd consider creating an employee advocacy position within the legal department." The irony wasn't lost on any of them. A year ago, Lisa was a junior associate worried about layoffs. Now she was positioned to become an internal champion for employee rights, ensuring that Meridian's transformation would have institutional permanence rather than depending solely on individual leadership. "I think we can find room in the budget," Shalom said, remembering her own early career and the mentorship she had wished for. "Corporate accountability works best when it's embedded in structure, not just policy." That evening, as Shalom walked through Pike Place Market, selecting ingredients for dinner, she reflected on the unexpected path her life had taken. Her father's small business had been destroyed by corporate predators, but his values had ultimately triumphed through her strategic patience and moral courage. The poison pill she'd embedded in her contract had served its purpose, but the real victory lay in what grew from the ashes. A company culture that valued people over profits, transparency over manipulation, and sustainable success over short-term extraction. Justice, she had learned, wasn't just about punishment. It was about prevention, creating systems that protected others from experiencing the pain she'd witnessed and endured. 1 year later, the same Seattle conference room that had witnessed Marcus Webb's downfall was filled with celebration rather than crisis. Spring sunlight cascaded through the floor-to-ceiling windows as Meridian Tech Solutions hosted its first annual Ethics in Business Symposium, an event that had drawn corporate leaders from across the Pacific Northwest. Shalom stood at the podium, surveying an audience of executives, academics, and journalists who had come to study Meridian's transformation from scandal to success story. Her acceptance speech for the Regional Business Ethics Award felt surreal.
12 months ago, she'd been an overlooked contract lawyer facing termination 3 days before Christmas. "The poison pill provisions in my employment contract weren't designed for revenge," she began, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had emerged during the company's rebuilding. "They were insurance against the kind of corporate predation that destroyed my father's small business and threatens working families across America. But I learned that true justice isn't about the complete destruction of your adversaries. It's about building systems that protect others from experiencing similar harm." In the audience, Emma sat in the front row, her Stanford acceptance letter folded in her purse alongside early admission offers from 3 other law schools. At 17, she had watched her mother navigate the complex intersection of personal vindication and social responsibility, lessons that would guide her own legal career. Her high school valedictorian speech, scheduled for the following week, would focus on the courage required to choose principle over profit. Diana Rodriguez, now 18 months into her permanent role as CEO, listened from the side of the room where Meridian's executive team had gathered. Under her leadership, the company had achieved its most profitable quarter in 5 years, while maintaining the highest employee satisfaction ratings in its history. The business press had labeled her turnaround a masterclass in stakeholder capitalism, proof that ethical leadership could deliver superior results. "The key insight," Shalom continued, "was recognizing that corporate accountability requires more than punishment after wrongdoing occurs. It demands preventative systems, transparent governance, and cultures that reward integrity over individual advancement." Jake Thompson adjusted his laptop screen, live streaming the event for employees who couldn't attend in person. His cybersecurity framework had become a model for other companies, and he'd been invited to present at 3 academic conferences on the intersection of technology and corporate ethics. The anonymous reporting system he'd helped design had processed 200 inquiries in its first year, resolving issues before they became crises. In the audience's second row, Lisa Park took notes on her phone, already planning how to incorporate Shalom's insights into her employee advocacy work. She'd passed the bar exam on her first attempt and had spent 6 months developing Meridian's Employee Rights Department, a position that hadn't existed at any other regional technology company. Her law school classmates envied her opportunity to pioneer corporate justice from within the system, rather than fighting it from the outside. Marcus Webb received a 4-year federal sentence last month, Shalom noted, her tone matter-of-fact rather than triumphant. But his punishment wasn't the victory. Our collective commitment to preventing future corruption was. Every anonymous report filed, every transparent decision made, every policy implemented to protect employee welfare represents a choice to build rather than simply tear down. Bob Castellano nodded from his position near the windows, his silver hair catching the afternoon light. The 73-year-old board chairman had initially resisted many of Shalom's governance recommendations, but the company's financial performance under ethical leadership had converted him into an advocate. He'd begun consulting with other boards about implementing similar oversight structures. "The most important lesson," Shalom concluded, "is that individual courage can catalyze systemic change, but lasting transformation requires collective commitment. No single person can reform corporate culture, but every person can contribute to environments where integrity becomes the natural choice rather than the heroic exception." The standing ovation lasted nearly 2 minutes, but Shalom's attention was focused on Emma's proud smile and the knowledge that her daughter would inherit a business world slightly more just than the one she'd encountered. After the symposium, Shalom walked through Pike Place Market with Emma, selecting ingredients for their traditional celebration dinner. The familiarity of the routine, examining produce, debating menu choices, and sharing observations about their day provided grounding after months of public recognition and professional acclaim. "Stanford called yesterday," Emma mentioned casually, though her excitement was obvious. "They're offering a full scholarship plus a research assistantship in their Corporate Governance Institute. Apparently your work here has made our family name interesting to academics studying business ethics."
Shalom laughed, remembering her father's small auto repair shop and his simple belief that treating customers fairly would always be rewarded in the end. He'd been right, though the timeline and mechanisms had been more complex than he'd imagined. He would have been proud of both of us, she said, referring to the grandfather Emma had never met, but whose values had shaped their family's approach to difficult decisions. That evening, as they prepared dinner together in their modest apartment kitchen, Shalom reflected on the transformation that had begun with her termination and evolved into something larger than personal vindication. The poison pill she'd embedded in her contract had served its purpose, but the real victory lay in the culture change it had enabled. Justice, she had learned, wasn't a destination, but a practice. Daily choices to protect the vulnerable, challenge the powerful, and build systems worthy of the trust people placed in them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight was for celebration, gratitude, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes preparation and principle could triumph over power and predation. Outside their windows, Seattle's lights twinkled like stars, each one representing families whose futures were slightly more secure because someone had chosen courage over comfort, community over individual gain. The poison pill had done its work. What grew in its wake was something better than revenge. It was hope. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.